Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. The U.S. National Garden Bureau has tagged 2015 as the year of the Coleus. Now, for the last 3 to 4 years, Coleus has made a big comeback. And it has started even earlier than that, but it became quite, let's say, abundant and abundantly clear that a lot of people like it. Now, why is Coleus making a comeback? The comeback from when I was a little boy was, everybody's got it. It grows like a weed. It flowers. You got to pinch the flowers off, etc. And so there was work for it, and it had to be in the shade, and it wouldn't take sun. Well, slowly with time, all the breeding that they have done, Coleus now comes in such a vast array of colors, sizes, and even forms. There's trailing ones, there's upright ones, large-leafed ones, small-leafed ones. You got ones with colored veins, you've got ones that are colored edges and margins, and you've got everything from chocolate to lime green, etc. So we really think that Coleus is going to be used in the garden more often, particularly with the downfall of a lot of the Impatiens Walleriana that everybody was planting in the shade for color. So they're using the Coleus not only in shade but also in sun, because the breeders have done a lot of work to get more Coleus and more varieties of Coleus out into the sun. Now, many of us who have been gardening for quite a while remember the Kong series. And King Kong was huge leaves. It was very coarse. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. I was the one on the side of I didn't like it. I thought it was too coarse, big, and ugly. But in the right place, the right sort of time, with the right materials, it can actually be a very nice transition plant. All the Coleus do very well in containers as well as in the garden. So whether it's in the shade or in a container in full sun, depends a lot on the variety. So you have to read the labels on the Coleus in the garden center. It'll tell you how much sun it'll actually take. Several years ago from Ball, I was growing redhead, and my family loved it. Not just because of the name, but because it did well in containers, it did well in the sun, it did well in the shade. But I really liked the color and the intensity of color in the sun as opposed to that in the shade. Very little pinching was done. I think I had to pinch flowers once. And when you did cut it back, it did set it back a little bit, but when it came back just as beautiful as when I got it. So it was a great plant. Because Coleus can be done both from seed and from cuttings, then the vegetative cuttings can produce great plants very quickly and in great numbers. So this is why. Also, some of the larger ones can actually go into larger pots, and therefore you're going to pay a little more, but you've got this instant effect right away. The chartreuse, the lime greens, they can all be used in the garden as a transition between some of the more colorful flowering plants that just don't quite go well together. So if you can separate them with this band or drift of chartreuse green, or even a complementary color of Coleus to the other two, then you can use it there. But in containers or on vertical walls, they are great. Why? Because on vertical walls, the trailing ones will grow up or grow down. The trailing ones really do well in containers. And they can fill a pot up very quickly. So don't go and overplant the Coleus. You're going to have to find a balance, or what will happen is the Coleus takes over. Now, you have to understand that they also don't like a lot of fertilizer. When you get a lot of fertilizer, you're going to lose a lot of color. The intensity of color is important in the fact that if you put it into too much sun, some varieties pale out. If you put it in too much shade, they pale out. But all of them, if you overfeed them, get these dull colors. So don't overfeed them. The vegetative growing Coleus actually prefer to be pinched, and if you're going to feel you need to pinch to keep size in this one, you want to do it as soon as it's sort of established in the ground or in the pot. In other words, as soon as possible. The reason for that is it takes 2 or 3 weeks for it to recover, and when you do pinch back, you often will get smaller leaves. It's one of the reasons why you don't pinch most of the very large leafed ones, particularly the Kong series of Coleus, because they don't respond well. The leaves get much smaller. To my way of thinking, that's not a bad thing, but for a lot of people who like that big, bold, ugly, okay, for that want of a better word or description, leaf, okay? So, if you like it, pinch it. If you don't, you want the big sizes, don't pinch the Kong series. The pinching also will actually give you much tighter branching. Now, they are breeding for this, but if you want that best branching, full lush plants, do pinch. If they do develop flowers, do pinch the flowers. You're going to have to really check the leaf for color and intensity. You're also going to have to check the labels to make sure you're buying the right variety for the right location as well. So with these being easier to grow, quicker to size, you're going to see them used in containers, both as fillers and as contrast to the other plants in the container. So ready to buy containers are going to have Coleus in them. So make sure that when they do that, that you're going to have a sun Coleus in with sun plants and not a shade Coleus in with the sun plants and vice versa. The effect will not be as startling if you get the wrong combination, whether you plant it or whether the greenhouse that you're buying it from did the planting. So you want to pick out ones, and you know darn well that this one is going to really pop out on a garden. Now remember this, for those of you who wish to have a long-term project, Coleus also makes a pretty good houseplant. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I used to have a Coleus plant in my bedroom window. And the only thing about those old ones was right through the winter, we're talking about hot water heating, right below it, it did very well. But I did have to pinch the flowers because in the winter it threw more flowers. That was the old ones. These are the new. So pick your Coleus, because there's a million different ones. Careful on which ones and the light exposure, and go for it. And remember, as an indoor plant, not a bad idea. If you're going to do this, here's a challenge. Grow it as a standard. Pick one that you really like, that's a little bigger, a little more aggressive, central stemmed. Pinch back the side branches and develop that thick stem. You're going to need a bamboo cane in the center of the pot that you're going to have to use some soft tie on to tie it to the stake. Remember, once around the plant, twist, twice around the stake when you tie. Doesn't matter whether it's a tree or a Coleus. And you're going to grow it up into a standard. And when you get the stem to the height you want, then let the head develop, keep it pinched, and you'll have an effective plant you can bring in and out throughout the coming years in your garden that nobody else has got. I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.